What's going on, guys? It's me, Zach, bringing you guys another fantasy football video. And this one, I'm going to go over a couple of players that I think are worth looking to involve in trades ahead of Week 7. It's been a pretty exciting first half of the season. I guess the end of this week will be the official mark of the end of the first half of the regular season for fantasy football. But regardless of where you stand in your fantasy leagues right now, just know there's a lot of work to be done. If you're 2-4, 1-5, just know that there are a lot of people there with you, and that plenty of them have bounced back to make the playoffs and win their championships before, and you certainly can do it as well. And if you're 5-1, 6-0, don't get too cocky. I've had plenty of teams start out that hot and fizzle out. So it's important to make sure teams get better and better as the season goes on. And one of the best ways to do that really is just making trades. It's one of my favorite parts of fantasy football. I'm always the kind of guy that's sending and receiving trades as much as possible throughout the week. So make sure that you just keep an eye on every player. It's good to keep an eye on all the stock for all these guys and just see whether or not you can make a move to make your team better every single week. But with that, before I do want to get into the video, I just want to take a minute to thank everybody for all the support we've been getting. We're really closing in on that goal of 300 subscribers. I think last I checked, we were at 297. So let's see if after this video we can push up to that 300 mark. If this is your first time on the channel, please do take a minute to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and click the notification bell so you get notifications when I put more videos out. It really just helps me know that I'm doing a good job, helps me interact with you guys, and makes me want to keep going. So with that, let's get into the video. Thank you again. So starting off here for the buy lows, I'm going to start with Justin Herbert. This is going to be the only quarterback thanks to buy low this week, but I think he's a pretty screaming value right now. He's had a really rough start to the season. I don't think he's quite recovered from that rib injury, and I think that's really making the Chargers try and get the ball out of his hands quickly just to help avoid him taking hits. We saw him throw the ball 57 times this last week, and only 6 of those were over 20 yards. And I think a lot of that is to do with his injury, and the reason a lot of those passes aren't being as effective as they would be is because they're missing Keenan Allen. So as Herbert gets healthier and as Keenan Allen comes back into the fold here, I think the Chargers offense is going to get a lot better, and you're going to see Justin Herbert really start performing like that top 3 quarterback he drafted him to be. And I think especially this season, it's just really hard to win fantasy matchups and be a contender in your league if you don't have one of those top tier quarterbacks, the Josh Allens, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar, and Jalen Hurts. It's about the 4 right now that are performing really well. I think Herbert's got a really good shot to join those 4. He's not going to cost you that much just because he's been so poor these last few weeks. He just didn't have a touchdown for the first time in 26 weeks against a Broncos defense that's just pretty good, but he's got 2 really good matchups coming up against the Seahawks and the Falcons. His bye week smacked in between those 2, but over the next 3 weeks, you're going to see him and Keenan Allen get really healthy, and they're going to have 2 really nice matchups. So this is the cheapest Herbert's going to be, and if you are in need of a quarterback, I know a lot of people you drafted, Tom Brady, Matthew Stafford, Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson. I could go on and on about the busts of these later round quarterbacks. So if you have one of those guys, you probably are looking to upgrade, and Justin Herbert might be the best way to do that. Next buy low for me is going to be T. Higgins. He's clearly still playing injured. We saw him get 10 targets this last week, and although he hasn't missed a game these last 2 weeks, he's been pretty clearly limited with his ankle injury. He just hasn't been himself. We saw him put up a 0 2 weeks ago and then only catch 6 passes for 47 yards this last week. So we're going to see him just be a lot better. This is really similar to me to what happened with Gabe Davis earlier this year, where he was playing through an injury and it just made his fantasy performances look quite bad, as to where had he just missed those 2 games, managers wouldn't have overreacted. So I think it's just really important to keep an eye on that. Higgins is certainly going to be a top 20 receiver this season, probably top 15. He was a wide receiver 15 through the first 4 weeks, and I have no reason to think he can't continue to do that. He's very clearly a talented wide receiver on a really good offense. He's going to be a high-end wide receiver 2 the rest of the year, and anytime there's a fantasy manager that's maybe a little frustrated with the last couple weeks, I think you're getting a good opportunity to buy low on him. So if you can trade wide receiver 2 value for Higgins, it's definitely worth doing this week. Next buy low for me is going to be Rashad Bateman. This one's pretty similar to the T. Higgins situation. This Ravens offense is really clearly struggling without him over the last 3 weeks, and he should just be a wide receiver 2 the rest of the season. This Ravens offense absolutely needs him. There hasn't been a clear wide receiver to step up so far, so he's going to slot in as the clear number 2 passing option behind Mark Andrews in this offense. And entering the year, the main fears about Rashad Bateman were the Ravens would revert back to their run-heavy offense, and there just wouldn't be enough volume to go around, but all of those fears are gone. The Ravens have been throwing the ball a ton. They still can't run the ball. J.K. Dobbins' knee flared up again this last week, so they had to go back to Kenyon Drake, and that's not going to be very sustainable. I know Gus Edwards is going to be back here soon, but I don't see this Ravens offense really figuring out how to run the ball very effectively over the course of the season, so they're going to have to continue to air it out, especially given how bad their defense is, it seems. So Bateman's going to be in a high-volume offense, and he's an explosive player. We saw him catch that slant and go to the house in week 1, so he's a guy that can have some blow-up weeks. There's going to be a lot of volume to go around, and he's not going to cost you all that much at all. He's been really underwhelming so far to start the season. He had 1 really good week and then underperformed for a few, and then he's missed the last several weeks. So Bateman's not going to cost you all that much, but I think he can be a wide receiver 2 for you the rest of the season. The next buy low for me here is going to be Ezekiel Elliott. This one might be a little surprising to some people given how bad he's been and how, honestly, I personally have been out on him as a player for the last several years, but He's the RB 25 on the season, which is obviously not great, but that's why you're going to be able to get him so cheap. He hasn't even been performing as a running back too, but he actually looked really good against the Eagles. I was a little bummed to see him score a touchdown in that game because it sort of made this buy low a little bit more difficult. But the Cowboys' offense is going to get better. We're going to see Dak Prescott return. Michael Gallup's getting healthier, so this offense should be more explosive as the season goes on. And they have a really favorable schedule going forward. They have a matchup with the Lions this week, in which that one should be an absolute shootout because pretty much every Lions game turns into that. So this defense for the Lions is really horrible. Zeke's going to have probably his best game of the season this week. Then they have good matchups against the Bears, Packers, and Vikings. So really they get to play the whole NFC North, and all of those guys can be beat through the run. So Ezekiel Elliott's going to have a really good stretch down of this next month, and he's just not going to cost you all that much. You can get him for probably low RB2 value. I know he still has that name value, but he's been underperforming for the last year. He's not going to cost you a ton. And I think if you're running back needy, who isn't really in fantasy right now, he's a guy that can really play for you every single week going forward. And he's just going to be a nice, consistent option. And an offense is going to start scoring a lot more points soon. The last buy low for me here is going to be Amon-Ra St. Brown. He should be perfectly healthy now that he had the week off, and then he was limited before week 5 or in week 5, and then he got the week 6 off with the bye. So Amon-Ra is going to be a perfectly healthy player. He's been really great so far when he's been healthy this season through those first 3 weeks. Obviously, he missed week 4 with the injury, and then week 5, he was on a bit of a pitch count, so it makes his stat line look a little underwhelming. But there's really no reason to believe that Amon-Ra is not going to be a top 12 receiver over the course of the season. This is an offense that's going to need to score a ton of points to keep up with how bad their defense is. They're certainly capable of doing that, and Amon-Ra is just a really good player. I think a lot of people are going to be worried about Jameson Williams returning as well, thinking that he's going to take snaps away from Amon-Ra, or at least take targets, but they just play really different roles in that offense. Jameson Williams is really going to be more of a threat to Josh Reynolds and DJ Chark to me than Amon-Ra. Amon-Ra is going to continue to be that slot guy. Jared Goff loves throwing the ball to the slot receiver. He managed to perform really well with Cooper Kupp before, and he's doing the same thing with Amon-Ra here. So Amon-Ra is going to be a high-end wide receiver 1 the rest of the season, probably top 10 for me, and I don't think he's going to cost you that. I think a lot of people view him as still a low draft capital in the NFL receiver who's had a couple really good games, and now he's coming off an injury, but he's going to be really good for you the rest of the season, so go get him, and you can even overpay because he's going to be great. The first sell high for me this week is going to be Chase Claypool. This one's probably pretty obvious, but I thought I'd touch on it anyway. He's coming off a really good performance. I think he had 8 for 96 and a touchdown, and he also tallied 8 rushing yards as well. They have been using him on the ground a little bit so far this season, and he did have 12 targets in week 5 as well, so I think it's going to be pretty easy to sell that he's an ascending player in this offense, but no matter how much you want to spin it, Chase Claypool is going to be the number 3 passing option in this offense. Deontay Johnson's a much better receiver, and George Pickens is just much more of an ascending player, so he's going to be the number 3 pass catcher in an offense that just quite frankly sucks. They have Kenny Pickett, who looks okay, but he's not going to be any sort of world beater. He's not going to make this Steelers offense great, and we know what Mitch Trubisky is. So at best, he's the 3rd best option in a decent offense, and that's just not something you can start every single week. He might have a couple more good games over the course of the season, but I'm not going to know when to play him, and he's just not a guy I want on my roster. So if you can trade him for anything start-worthy, you should do it because Chase Claypool just isn't start-worthy himself. Next buy sell high for me is going to be Dalvin Cook here. He actually made the list last week, and I think I'm going to bring him up again here. He only had 13 carries in week 6. He's had 1 reception, I believe, and really he was a non-factor in the first half. He had 5 carries for 9 yards in the entire first half. It looked like he was going to just be one of the duds of last week, but he managed to really save his game with a 50-plus yard rushing touchdown towards the end of the game. It really made him look far more respectable than he was from a fantasy perspective. His snap share did increase up to over 80% this week, but it's important to note that Alexander Mattison was on the injury report all week, so it's not quite shocking there. It just, to me, is more to do with Alexander Mattison being injured than Dalvin Cook retaking those snaps. He's just not involved in the passing game. They're not as run-heavy a team as they've been in the past. Kevin O'Connell clearly wants to air it out. And when you have guys like Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen, I don't quite blame him. So Dalvin Cook's going to be an efficient player. He's going to get 15 to 18 touches every single week, so he's still going to be a low-end running back 1 for me, but I just don't think he's got that high-end upside that he's had in the past. And if you can sell him to somebody who's running back needy, if you can trade him for a Leonard Fournette and something, trade him for Joe Mixon and something, I'd absolutely do that just because I think I prefer those guys to him the rest of the season, and I don't think most people view it that way. Last sell high for me this week is going to be Daryl Henderson. He still really just doesn't look great as a player. He had 13 carries for 43 yards this last week. He did find the end zones. That made his fantasy performance look pretty good, but that's not something you want to rely on every single week out of him. Kyren Williams is a guy who's going to be back soon. I don't know exactly when, but he is a guy that they really did intend to use week 1 before he got hurt on the opening kickoff of week 1. They also are using Malcolm Brown to some extent, so he's not by any means the clear number 1 in this offense, and it's completely possible, if not likely, that this Rams team is going to be trading for a running back sometime soon, potentially this week even. They got their bye week right now, so it would give them an opportunity to incorporate him. I won't be shocked at all to see the Rams do that. We know that they're certainly a team that will make moves during the course of the season, and I just can't see them, especially given the kind of team they are. They certainly think they can win now. It doesn't make sense for them to continue the season with Daryl Henderson and Malcolm Brown as their two running backs. So a running back acquisition will be made by this team, and until it happens, he's going to be perceived as the running back one on what should be a decent offense. So sell high on him while he's just the perceived running back one in this Rams offense, because I don't think that perception is going to last very long. Thank you guys for watching. If you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, check out these other videos here if you haven't. If you want more content, please feel free to follow me on Twitter at RealSteelFFB. I'll be more active on there as the season goes on. Thanks. Catch you later.